Elevation Nation, a long overdue podcast guest for you this evening, is finally joining the nation. An incredible story that I cannot wait to share with you, and more importantly, a fellow Chicago Hooper, if I can count myself in that mix, even though I sat on the bench most of the time. Jimmy Gavin and I go, I would say, way back now. I'm very good friends with his younger brother, and Jimmy's been running in the Chicago basketball circuit for a long time, but he was one of the few guys that I'm going to say made it out of the Chicago basketball circuit and did something with that. Jimmy went on to play professional basketball overseas for many years, played for some summer league teams as well in the NBA, and quite possibly has the dirtiest mixtape of all time on YouTube when he went absolutely off and scored God only knows how many points. I still show my friends that and brag about Jimmy's journey there. Jimmy, we are so excited to have you on the podcast. Welcome to Elevation Nation.
Appreciate that intro. That's pretty special right there. And thank you guys for having me. It's been cool to follow what you guys are doing, and excited to connect with you guys right now.
Jimmy, are you prospect guy? Is that how this came into the fold? Okay.
Prospect night. Sam definitely knows a few of our guys. Grant is my brother. Sam was a Stevenson guy, right? So all in the northwest suburbs there.
Well, shout out Prospect. That's a special school to Sam and myself, because that's our first Elevation Nation speaking event was at Prospect. Got to hang with John Camardella and all the special people over there, and I got to walk around that massive community. Holy crap, it was so big. I was overwhelmed.
That's awesome.
Parker went to a tiny boys school. That's why. I didn't bring him to Stevenson yet, but comparatively, it was big for him. And yes, John, Cuba, Prospect, the Knights have a special place in our heart. We've had many Prospect nights on the podcast, and Jimmy, we're just hyped to have you on as well. Obviously, I shared a little bit about your story, but this is Elevation Nation. We want to give you the opportunity to share an elevator pitch on who Jimmy Gavin is. So who are you, brother?
That's a big question right off the bat. I would say, first and foremost, I'm a product of having great parents, as well as just being a collection of a unique set of experiences that have taken me around the world, some good, some bad. And I think that's kind of what makes a person, right? The obstacles that you've overcome, some things you're born with, some things you have to rewire or do a little maintenance on. But hopefully this is a story that's still in progress. It's been a year of transition.
Is.
Yeah. And excited to dive kind of into some of that story with you guys.
We're excited. I think you're exactly right. It's still in progress, right? Stories have chapters, and we're on future Jimmy looking ahead chapter. But before we get into that, I would be remiss if I didn't have us go back a little bit to paint this incredible picture of, like you so eloquently just stated, some circumstances, some experiences that happened to you. So can we throw it back to, I would want to say freshman year, Jimmy, but around that time when you were going into high school, because I think you have an incredible story of, perseverance, of some tragedy in the family, of your own health situation that you've gone through, and how you push through to find a new purpose. And so take as much time as you need, because it's a special story, and I'm just excited to hear it from your mouth.
Yeah, if we go back even a little bit further, sports were always the deal in our neighborhood. Not even just including organized teams, but capture the flag, recess football, games that just continued on from recess to lunch to after school, biking around. Had the opportunity to play with some pretty good athletes, and I was exposed to that from a young age. Jimmy Garoppolo, NFL Super Bowl appearance as a quarterback, Miles Osei, Ben Brust, Wisconsin Badger. All these guys were on my baseball team at 8 years old. So at the time, if you would have asked me at 8, I was a lottery pick. There was no doubt in my mind. I was on the big board at the time. And I'd say up until about the 6th grade, I kind of stayed at the same pace with those guys, was one of the better players in my town. Of course, we all find out that there's more than one town after we get a little bit older. But, seventh
so
grade
true.
was a turning point for me, because Up until then, I'd say I had it pretty easy. Like sports came naturally, and that was my crowd. But I started to get sick in the 7th grade. So that's where the health journey started. And from 7th grade until sophomore year, it just kind of deteriorated. So I know you alluded to freshman year. When I walked into Prospect, I think I was about maybe 5'3" and 90 pounds. So I wasn't intimidating anyone. And I think in sports, when you don't have the physicality, like even if you have the heart for the game or the skills, it just doesn't really translate anymore. And then sophomore year was really where it kind of all fell apart for me from that side.
So what happened sophomore year? You're waking up one day, and then how did it all change?
It was still gradual. Like it just was getting worse and worse. I couldn't hold anything in my body, so as soon as I would go out to eat, I'd be coming back from lunch and I'd have to use the bathroom immediately. Like, some guy heard like a dying animal in the stall, but that was just me coming back from Wendy's. And even after school, like I had a practice where essentially a guy set a screen on me, and I basically was like in the process of shitting my pants, and I like waddled out of the gym like a penguin, had to walk around the cheerleading practice just hoping nothing was showing up. And it wasn't too long after that practice when I was like, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to keep doing this, and ended up getting hospitalized, super high fever, and that led to like a serious round of tests, which led to the diagnosis of Crohn's disease, which was pretty severe. And that's when I kind of learned that, that's what had been going on all those years. And prior to that, I just didn't know.
And so that diagnosis obviously probably came at a sense of relief to know what you had, but also I would imagine overwhelmed to be like, I'm on this journey now. What am I supposed to do? Right. And so as a young kid, you're in your high school prime thinking you're going to go play all these sports, have a very serious medical condition that you're now trying to navigate. So on one hand, you're thankful we got these tests. I know what it is that's making me run to the bathroom all the time, but now I need to change my lifestyle. And so now we're at what, sophomore year high school, Jimmy?
Sophomore year in high school.
So how did we change our mindset? How did we persevere? You alluded to incredible parents that raised you and the rest of your siblings just the right way. So kudos to them. How did you change that mindset and pivot really your sense of focus sophomore year from having fun with friends to surviving?
Yeah, I think the way you laid it out would have been a good perspective to have. I remember my mom had mentioned to me leaving the doctor, I had told her, look, at least we know what this is now because I've been living with it. But I'm not sure I really believed those words. I think it started like this layer of like walking around with a defense mechanism, like something about just, I never wanted to verbalize that I was sick. And I think like that's something I would share with younger kids is I know I felt like I was on an island a little bit because I was scared. And instead of like verbalizing that or saying that, like sometimes it's just simple, like I need help, I would even, my parents would try to help me, but even when I got to the doctor, I would try to downplay my symptoms all those years, thinking like it would make me less sick. And, I think if kids are out there and you're not sure what's going on, like that's the time to speak up. Maybe not to everyone, because I know it's uncomfortable. So at the time, I don't think I don't know that I guess I was surviving by nature, but that was kind of a point where I feel like I started to quit on myself. And that's kind of how high school went.
You're thinking, so like all of high school, you're saying that, you're navigating this big change, this big thing that happened. You come to more information. Maybe it's a good thing that you know what you now have, but now it's looking forward. How does Jimmy progress, get to graduation? I imagine for academics, but what about also basketball? Let's talk about that. So, you're dealing with a new disease, a new normal, new reality. But your urge and passion for the thing that you love does not go away. So let's talk a little bit about that. How were you able to suppress the, you know what, I got to grow up a little bit and handle this disease instead of, looking at, I just want to be a kid and play basketball?
I think I felt sorry for myself. I think I felt like how you said it at the end. I think that you laid it out really well. I was like, why me? Why this? But you're right. The passion is never like created or destroyed. I kept tugging at that dream, right? So at the beginning, I got into a series of medications that didn't really work. It's kind of trial and error. And finally, going into my junior year, I'd gained a little bit of ground. And that's the year I tried out for the varsity. And John Camardella actually was recently named the head coach there. And he was a hugely successful college player and ended up being a great coach for our community. But my junior year, I trained really hard for that tryout. But even the training was mixed with a lot of ups and downs. Some days were better than others. Other days, one of the symptoms of Crohn's, like really severe cramping. So I'd get out there and I was nervous, I thought I did everything I could, but even on the day of tryouts, there was plays that I thought I could make where my body didn't keep up, but I gave it everything I had and sat down when it was my turn in coach's office. And I want to think that he knew how much it meant to me, of course, but I just wasn't good enough. And he tried to tell me that in a nice way. But still, that's one of I'd say the toughest days of my life, because that felt like that was it. That was kind of my Hail Mary. And when I walked home that day, and I vaguely remember it, but my mom was like shuffling around some papers, like pretending she's busy, but really she just wants to know how the tryout went, hovering near the front door, and just one look was all it took, and she knew that it didn't go well, and I crashed out that night, and so that was tough. And but thankfully, I did find ways to stay in touch with it, and I think that was where like the dream started to get reborn. Actually, I don't know if I knew it at the time, but I always had something in me that was like, let's keep going, let's do something, And so it actually started to become golf with Grant. We'd sneak out to the golf course, hit some balls around, and for all the golfers out there, that addiction of like not being able to hit the ball when you first get out there, and then you hit that first pure shot, and it's kind of the spirit of improving, right? Which is maybe not as physically demanding as basketball, but it kept it alive. And then senior year, I played in a park league and a church league, and my body started catching up, and I started playing better. I started, being able to run faster. I could dunk a basketball now. And senior year, even I started getting questions like, you ever thought about playing high school basketball again? But that's where I would draw the line. I was like, nah, like it's done for me. Inside, I think it was still burning. It's hard to know at the time.
You weren't 5'3" dunking to basketball, right?
No, I was not Spud Webb, but I had grown. I had grown. The thing with Crohn's is it's an autoimmune disease for people who don't follow it, and it's hard to get the right nutrition, and without that, puberty was delayed. So the body was undernourished, and I just didn't grow. Finally, when I found the right treatments, I started to grow. But then that might have made it even harder, because now it's like I'm kind of starting to feel like myself again. But then high school closes, The guy at the principal or whatever you call the guy at the high school is talking about the memories you made in high school, the ground you gained on your dreams. And I'm sitting in the crowd like, what the hell is he talking about? He finished the speech. I pulled my robe off, and I was the first one out. I was just like, this sucks.
We look back on these chapters, right? You mentioned a book earlier, so I'm going to stick with the chapter analogy. We look back and we think about the experiences we had, both positive and negative. But I can imagine for you, Jimmy, it felt a lot like this confident, tall, strong hooper, young man, fun friend that's healthy, trapped inside a smaller, sick, malnourished human's body. And, obviously a little bit different, but I resonate a tad with that story of I am 5'7" and was never going to be taller than 5'7", 5'8". And you go and you have this passion and this drive and you love the game and you work harder than anybody, but I'm not Duncan. I'm not doing the things that I want to do and
Phenomenal
and making the
mustache,
impact. Thank you so much. It's been a
phenomenal
work in
mustache.
progress. Hey, I appreciate it. But we look back on these chapters for positives and negative lessons. And I think for you, high school wasn't that positive, but it gave you a lot of the foundation for you at this next level, which I got to give you kudos. You may be, I don't know if we can get this statistic proven somewhere, you may be one of the only hoopers to ever play college basketball having never played high school basketball. And that takes a hell of a lot of mental fortitude, as we call it in Elevation Nation, which I believe and Parker believes is the missing piece that young adults don't have or aren't necessarily taught that they need to go out and conquer the real world. However, Jimmy, for you, you didn't need to be taught it because you lived it, right? And mental fortitude is knowing yourself, who you are at your core. You knew that you had a passion, a desire to work harder than everybody, a vision, which I think we're about to get into what that vision, it was hazy at first, but now it cleared up graduating high school. And then most importantly, fuel. You know what drives you every single day and what makes you grind, the passion for the game, the legacy that you want to leave as a Gavin. And so I just think looking back, it might have been a lot of negatives, but goodness, for you to be one of the only hoopers to never play high school basketball to then make it to college is incredible. So I want to talk about that. We threw off the cap and gown. We're now, I almost feel like that was symbolic for you, like shedding this chapter, this negative chapter where you didn't feel like yourself. And now under that cap and gown is like a strong, over 6 foot guy who's ready to go take on the college world. What was next for Jimmy?
It was, and I totally agree with all the things you just said, but I don't know that I would take credit for all of my mental toughness because it's a process to build it up. And as I get on to this next part, I learn from a lot of people. And that's why eventually I was able to achieve success. But leaving high school, I still wasn't ready. I chose Mississippi State because out of all the schools I got accepted to, it was the farthest one from home. And I was bitter. That's why I left, because I was like, if I go down here, at least nobody's gonna know that I was a bum in high school. I had 0 points, 0 minutes, and I tried to run from that. But after I got dropped off at school, the next morning, the first place I went was the rec center. So I don't know, I don't know how well I stayed away from the game, but I tapped ID and got into pickup hoops. And actually, that's where I made a lot of my friends freshman year. My friend Abe, Kenny, Sean, and we had our little crew. We played pickup hoops every day. We'd meet at the rec, and it was fun. Actually, that was. I think there was a time that I was like, all right, like this, the hoops didn't work out, and it was tough to see my friends now, like on the ESPN websites and stuff. Like I was happy for them, but I was jealous at the same time because that's what I wanted. But still, I was having fun just playing the game. Went and visited my cousin in New York, had some new experiences. My cousin Paul, he's been a big influence in my life. And who knows, what trajectory my life would have taken. But one morning, 8 a.m. English quiz, I'm sitting in the desk and scratch off some answers on the Scantron, pull out my phone, see what's going on. And I slide it like halfway out of my pocket, and I see multiple missed calls and texts from both my mom and dad, which is strange because you guys know parents usually know what's going on with your schedule, like 8 a.m. So I just stepped out in the hallway because it felt urgent. And my dad picked up the phone on the other end, and he told me that your younger brother was in a car crash and he didn't make it. And it's not like anything you go through prior really sets you up to handle that. It's just everything else stops, like the world stops turning for a second. And I called my buddy Sean on the phone, and I was like, hey, I need a ride to the airport. Something's happened. He put his hazard lights on. He drove me to Jackson, or I forget where the airport is, but I flew home that afternoon, and I was like looking out in the clouds and stuff and just looking for answers. But when I got home, I spoke at my brother's funeral, and I felt like it was my time to be there for my family. And from there, I still didn't know what to do, honestly. Like, I didn't have a lot of answers, and I just kind of tried to keep going and acting like things were all right. But the following fall, I had a big like incident one night with like a nightmare, and kind of my mind just unraveling on me. It's like, hey man, you're gonna have to take a break here. Like, you've been through a lot, and this is kind of a warning sign for you. And so that night, I basically crawled out of bed. I mean, it felt like my arms were strapped to the bed. It was like a night terror. I didn't know if I was asleep or awake, and I basically crawled across the campus, and it was like 4 or 5 in the morning, and I sat in front of the red brick building. It was the counselor's office, and I just waited till she got there, and I was like, hey, I'm not doing well. So
I mean, I appreciate you so very much for opening up and getting vulnerable with us and sharing that story. I know how raw and hard it probably still is, and I want to commend you as well, younger Jimmy, for knowing that you needed help and going there. I think one of the things Parker and I try to pride ourselves on with Elevation Nation is making a place where young men can be vulnerable. I think, unfortunately, especially for all three of us that grew up around sports, vulnerability and not being okay was not an option. The whole point was push yourself to not be okay. Like, no shit, you're not okay. Work harder. Suck it up. Be tougher. You're never going to get anywhere if you complain like that or you're not okay. And so one of the beautiful things, and I'm just giving you credit here, Jimmy, like, Parker and I created this platform. I don't want you to think that story is not going to go and impact a bunch of young men or women's lives. I think we all are looking for people that we can look up to that are vulnerable, that things aren't always okay. So I thank you for sharing that. I think it's really important. And obviously now we're fast forwarding a little bit, but you went into that counselor's office.
Yep.
And you needed to take a step back and reevaluate. And again, I'm going to tie it back to mental fortitude, but the vision for what was next for Jimmy obviously came shattering down and changed. And so we used our mindset and our mental fortitude to take a step back and reevaluate that. So what did you do next?
they wanted to keep me there. They wanted to medicate me and keep me there at this place. But before I checked in, or whatever you call it,
at the university.
At the university counselor had recommended me to essentially a mental hospital in the area in Starkville,
Wow.
Mississippi. So I drove there, and the entire time I'm driving there, my mind is essentially still playing tricks on me, right? Because I'm in a state of like chaos or anxiety, whatever you want to call it. So even when I'm looking in the rearview mirror, I'm like seeing two of myself. Like I'm really like, my mind is frayed, and I'm just trying to make it there. And so they're recommending treatment. But I called home, and they said, hey, like, Jimmy, like, I think it's time that you just come home. So my dad flew or drove down. I don't remember. I think he flew down maybe. We packed up my stuff that night or the next day whenever he got there, and I came home. But I think this moment right here is important to zoom in on the power of family. Because again, like, when I had the chance to come home and have like a landing pad and have people that care about me, like, if I didn't have that, like, I don't know what I would have become, because when we're at our lows, like, that's when we need a helping hand sometimes. And it came in the form of experience with therapy with a family therapist named Kristen Marzoff. She's now become a friend of mine, and her teaching or her framework for helping people is based on somatic experiencing. It can help people coming back from wars with PTSD or unhealed trauma, grief. And those sessions with her is what changed my life. That was the catalyst, because on the first day I showed up, I told her, I was like, look, I don't know if you can help me. Like, I think my mind's gone. Like, didn't really feel like myself. But she was like, okay, like, let's just take it slow. And she has an unbelievable set of tools that can help you essentially, like, to describe her theory. And I don't want to speak for her because, she's so well trained in it. But what she's passed on to me has been, a part of my own toolkit that I can take with me wherever in the world ever since. Essentially, trauma is stored in our body, almost like pockets of like emotional quicksand, she would call it, things like that. And her methods help you to remove the interference and allow your body to feel what it wants to feel. Even something as simple as like supporting your eyes or taking your index fingers and just feeling like the vibrations like in your eyes. And basically, I think these type of situations are scary, and her methods helped turn these emotions into physical sensations. And as they became physical sensations, we can now deal with them. What's going on in your chest while this is happening? What are you feeling in your toes? And essentially, my life was frozen at that point, and she helped unlock that. And that's when the wheels started turning, because she started removing blocks and helping me. I started to write a lot. I would write when I got home after the sessions, sheets of paper, and I throw them out, because at the beginning they were still really bitter. But it was almost like I was getting this stuff out, I think that's a huge thing, is to get it out so you're not trapped behind it. And this stuff just evolved. I started reading like old authors like Thoreau and Emerson, and I just had this sort of like revival, and she started to weave in this imagery while we were deep in the sessions, almost like in a meditative state. And she's like, do you think you could imagine yourself dribbling a ball? Just something simple, just the pounding of a ball on the wood floor. What about taking a shot? What about launching up for a slam dunk? And she was almost kind of setting the table. And then when I would go home, I was like, is this really what I want to do? Or like, what if I could do this? And I started writing. I wrote in Sharpie on the back of my door on a poster. And the last question I had was, what if I'm the only one in my way? And for the last 10, 15 years, that's the question I've been trying to answer.
It's incredible to hear you talk through that, Jimmy. Just my own personal journey with grief and loss, and you're bringing up some feelings that I felt very recently, and I just appreciate your willingness and your mental fortitude to share very openly and vulnerably about your own grief, because I think, to your point earlier, I think people need a space to share, whether that's publicly on a podcast or as simple as sharing with themselves on a piece of paper. But we as humans need to express our emotions, and that is something that is natural in us. But some reason in 2025, we unnaturally hold in those emotions. But we're emotional beings. We need to find spaces to release. And so I appreciate you providing that insight and background experience, especially as you've gone through it. And I think it's absolutely fascinating that you just said there's one question that has driven you the past 15 years of your life. One freaking question. Sam and I say it all the time to everyone we speak to. The deeper the questions, the deeper the answers in life that we'll find. Talk us through a little bit more about what that question that you just gave us means to you, and how that set you forth onto your journey of elevation.
It gave me a place to start, I think, or it gave me the permission to try. And I think it helped me take some of my power back too. Because I think through going through a lot of that stuff, you almost become a victim of circumstance. And from the position of being a victim, there's just not a lot you can do. It's like life is happening to me. Why me? Why this? And, it's easy to get caught up in that frame of thought, but there's just not a lot that you can do. And so I guess the what if I'm the only one in my way question meant after that, there's there's not much more talking to do. You got to get after it, you know. And if you're about it, you got to be about it. And that was the spark. I had been doing some creative sessions with my cousin Paul. Like I said, he's been a big influence in my life. He's always been bold and courageous in his creativity. And seeing him do his thing, and then we started to play pickup ball together at home, and I met an old friend named Kyle Miklosh. He went to Hersey. He was a really good high school basketball player, and he was like, "Oh, Jim, it's good to see you, man. You know, you look good. Like, what are you doing nowadays?" And I was like, you know, just trying to figure it out, like trying to get in shape. But really, like, I had started to practice. Like, I was taking some JUCO classes at Harper, but when I wasn't in those classes, like, I was getting after it. I was YouTubing drills. I was running hills. I would sneak onto the Harper court, line up shares, do any drills I could find. And I think Kyle saw that, or, you know, people start to feel that spark or that belief. And he was like, I think I have something for you. And he said, let me talk to Steve Pratt. He owns this gym called The Warehouse in Deerfield, Illinois. He's like, I think that's the spot for you right now. And he's like, I'm going to text you. And a week later, I was driving, 15, 20 minutes up the road, Waukegan Road, pulling off this little dirt trail. And I met Steve that day, and he's like, Jimmy, welcome in, man. And I worked out, and we were doing all types of drills I hadn't done before, shooting fundamentals. I mean, Steve is a really, really high-level basketball person, like, really thinks the game, teaches the game. He's like a truth teller. And we sat down in this little metal bleachers after the first day, and I was like, Steve, I want to be a college basketball player. And he was like, whoa, all right. It's day one. Let's take it slow. But one of the coolest things I would say about Steve is never once did he ever outrightly say that my dream wasn't possible. He just invited me back, and I kept showing up.
He was driving up the road closer to me at the Warehouse. Steve, obviously well known in the Chicago basketball community. And so I think it's important to have mentors that don't shoot down our dreams. So often people say the percent chance of that happening is very, very low. And so then we don't try. And I think, unfortunately, in today's day and age, that has become far too common. Whereas Parker and I and you, Jimmy, have taken a very different approach. Just go. Just try. Just start. Just do. So what if you don't actually become a basketball player in college? Try. You don't want regret. So what if you don't start a podcast and you're posting on LinkedIn and people make fun of you? Just try. And I think for all of us now, just starting and trying and doing something that we're passionate about has brought us to incredible places. And so I want to continue on your story, Jimmy. You obviously started training with Steve. You had that dream. You had that vision of where you wanted to go. You were exercising your mental fortitude. What happened next?
Well, Steve took some of the raw passion and ability I have, and he started to, put a system to it and consistency. There's also others around. George, he became an NBA coach. Dimitri, Jewel Lloyd, Duye Dukin. One day a guy walked in a Duke hoodie, John Shire, Illinois basketball legend. So suddenly I was around the game again, like in a different way. I'd watch John as he was like a hero. If you're a suburban kid in Illinois, this guy's scoring 20 points in a minute and a half. And within just a couple months, like I'm matching up with him. And obviously he didn't know who I was, but for me, it felt like the NBA Finals. But I kept pestering Steve. I was like, Steve, I want to play. I want to play. I want to play. I think what he was doing was testing me a little bit. Like, he wanted to see how serious I was. But I would do the morning sessions with him. We'd do skills, drills. He'd have us sometimes play with like 6th, 7th graders, because at that level, you were the best guy on the court. You could work on different stuff. Sometimes you'd be playing against guys who were better than you. So Steve was setting all this up to really mold players into something. And like you said, he didn't have to do it. It was something he did just because he loves the game of basketball. And finally, after probably started maybe 4 months of showing up every day, he was like, all right, I'm going to make some calls for you. And that started the trial process. He was set to do a shooting camp on the East Coast in Vermont. he's actually from the East Coast. Steve's from the East Coast. And so he called a couple schools out there, and they were like, all right, like we have some open gyms coming up. Like, you know, you're going to be out here. We'll take a look. So Steve and I drove out to Vermont. His daughter is riding in the back seat. She was probably 4 years old at the time. And so I was going to assist as a counselor. But then what I was looking forward to, I was going to play with the college basketball teams out there. And so we finished up with the first day, and the first tryouts in, I think, University of Vermont's in Burlington, or somewhere in that area. But we're driving over there, and I mean, I can't even sit still. Like, this is the first time I'm going to play with a college team. And by the time you park the car, I'm sprinting to the front door. Like, I can't wait to get in there and get my I've been picturing it all day, like green and gold. They got their logo's like a catamount. I think it's like a cougar or something. It's leaping through the V on the side of the brick. Like, it's unbelievable. And I get to the door, and I crank on it, and it's locked. And then I look back. I'm like, Steve, what are we doing? And he's already kind of seeing what's going on. He's calling the coach. Like, oh yeah, sorry, Steve. Didn't have enough guys today. We canceled the open gym. And I was like, we just drove to Vermont. But
oh my gosh.
Steve was like, all right, you know, don't worry about it. These things happen. Like, we'll focus on opportunity number 2. So we had finished up the camp together. It was a couple-day shooting camp, and we went down to Hartford, Connecticut, I think, University of Hartford. And this time we actually got in the building, so it was progress. They were doing like a team practice with the coach, and I remember we sat courtside, and the guys were flying around. I don't know why, but it just felt intimidating. Like, if you've ever been to a college basketball practice, and you know, everyone's got the gear on, and the pace, the intensity, like, I started getting nervous. The coach took me up into his office. Like, it's like a classic coach's office, smells like coffee, and you know, he starts drawing stuff up on the whiteboard, but it didn't sound good. He was a little bit pessimistic, maybe realistic. And he was like, you're going to have eligibility issues. You've already been to 2 schools. You didn't play in high school. I don't know. And I ended up playing the pickup game. And whether it was being intimidated by the speed or what I just heard in the coach's office, when I played in the pickup game, I had kind of developed a way of playing where I was like willing to take chances at the warehouse. But for whatever reason on that court, I didn't. Like, I set screens. I tried to get some other guys open, you know, make the extra pass. And Steve was pissed. You know, we got back to the car, and he's like, what the hell was that? You know, and I was like, I don't, what do you mean? I was nervous. And he was like, look, you're not going to make a team by fitting in. He's like, nobody cares or knows who you are. He's like, you got to kill these dudes. You got to absolutely stand out. Like, you got to be incredible. And so he dropped me at the train station. He had to go back, took his daughter back to Chicago. I had one more tryout in Fairfield. And there, the coach actually like showed me some love ahead of the thing, but he's like, hey, we can't watch the tryout. NCAA rules, they rarely make sense. You never know. Week by week, it's different. So I would say leading up to that week of tryouts, I mean, it was a huge high. But like, I had slept on one of the kids' couches at Fairfield, and then like the dream had kind of crashed right there. Like, 3 tryouts, none really went too well, and then I was coming back home. So.
But you got out there, and it probably felt, you know, as disappointing as it might have been. I'm sure you learned a little bit about yourself by being out there competing with some better competition than you've been competing with in the past. So the road doesn't end there, clearly. What comes next? Let's hear it.
Well, the summer was winding down, and I was getting a little bit nervous because I think it was like either late July maybe or early August. And Bradley was actually recruiting one of Steve's players, Bradley in Peoria. And Steve was like, hey, can this dude tag along? Like, you know, whatever. He's got a weird story. And so George drove us down to Peoria. And I think you're right, Parker. Like, the tryouts didn't go well out east, but it taught me something. And I remembered like what Steve had told me. And I'm like, look, if I don't ever get another shot, like I gotta at least go out. Like, these dudes have to know who I am. So that night I was like, I gotta I got to do something. I got to at least take my shot. And it was just one of those nights. If you guys know, as a shooter, the rim looked like an ocean. And I mean, at this point, it's an urban legend. It's a myth. So it's a pickup game. But I think I made, like, it was one of those nights I made everything. And Gino Ford was the coach at the time, and he left a voicemail on Steve's phone. He's like, Steve, like, who is this kid? I felt like I was watching a scene from The Natural. And he called me a week later, and he was like, Jimmy, just gonna keep it quick here. Gonna offer you a spot on the team as a walk-on. It's gonna be tough. You're probably not gonna play a lot, but I think I tuned him out right when I heard. I heard I'm gonna be a college basketball player, and I figured I'd figure out the rest as we go.
I mean, what an incredible story. And I know it doesn't end there. There's more, but I just want to reflect on the fact that your dream was to go play college basketball, and you set out and you accomplished that dream. And I think so often we have dreams that we think are unreachable, unfathomable. I never played a lick of high school basketball. How could I be a college basketball player? I've gone through all this adversity. How could I overcome it? And so we never try. And for you, Jimmy, I think, again, your story is going to be a movie one day. I know that without a doubt, shadow of a doubt in my mind. It will be a movie. And I hope you get to star as yourself, because I feel like you'd be a great actor in it.
Less
but
hair.
It's just,
Less hair,
a little less hair, but that's okay. And just really proud of you for persevering and got to be a college basketball player. I know there's a ton more that we could get into, but I want to spare some details because you do have a book coming out that's going to talk all about some of these. So I want to talk a little bit about, we reached the goal of playing college basketball. You had a journey there where we went to a couple places. Talk to us about that. And then the dream changed from college to, holy shit, a professional basketball player. How did that transition happen? Let's talk quickly through that, because I want to make sure we now can talk about this future chapter, which I think is so exciting.
Yeah, I think what you said is important, because that was my dream and I had started to achieve it. And I think that's important to keep that perspective, because I think what happens is, as you go along, we move the goalposts on ourselves, and you can feel like you're always in a constant state of chasing, which it's okay, but that was special. And even my cousin Paul said, like, if he tells the story to somebody else, he's like, that, just even walking onto Bradley, that's like the story to me. And that was proof that it's possible to dream again. But I ended up, Bradley was like just running through the rest of my college career really quick. Bradley, I mean, just making the team, it was still a huge jump. Had a lot of stuff to figure out. Everyone on the team was better than me, stronger than me. I got my ass kicked every day at practice. By the time I started to finally figure it out, I actually ended up having an incident with my Crohn's. Had bleeding in my gastrointestinal tract and lost a lot of blood, was unconscious, like bleeding out in the hospital, had an operation. But to your point, like, at that point, I'd found my belief again. So it's like, it was different now. Like the challenge had come, but it was like, I got out of the hospital, they'd give me a bottle of like pills to take or whatever. And like, I don't even want to take any of these. Like, I just, you know what I mean? Like, I already had a direction. And if anything, you don't always get all the steps right, but if you get the direction right in life, you figure it out. And Coach Regal called me up to Parkside. I tried out at Parkside, and he gave me a full scholarship on the spot. That changed my life. University of Wisconsin-Parkside. It's a Division II school in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Had the opportunity to play on two amazing teams there. And why that was important, I got a chance to make an impact and really grow into a player. Like, Coach is a great teacher of the game. On the backside of those 2 years, my friends Dan Poneman and Jelani Floyd, both agents now, helped me transfer to the Division I level as a graduate transfer. And that's where I met Pat Kelsey and his staff, now the head coach at Louisville, University of Louisville. But at the time, I played for them at Winthrop. Incredible experience. there were so many people pouring into me, whether it was my friend Pierre, who was training me, so generous with his time, and all these different people that were shaping my mentality, which you alluded to at the beginning. I think that was the reason for the success. I think you have to apply the effort as an individual and put that belief in yourself. But once you do, it's like an avalanche, of momentum, and people come out of nowhere and suddenly they're willing to help you because you've taken the steps to help yourself. College basketball, I love it to this day, and really grateful for the chance that I had a chance to play.
You know what, like, Jimmy, I obviously meeting you for the first time this evening and just hearing your story and everything you're talking through, it's almost like all of these people not only took a chance on you, maybe not a chance, invested a lot of time and effort in you because they knew something beyond your just basketball ability. And from what I gather from our 48-minute conversation right now is that they saw something that you can't put on a stat sheet, that you honestly can't even find on a court or on tape, or even on the internet. And that is your mindset in how you approach life and how you see the world and how you are driven by yourself taking on a challenge and utilizing your mental fortitude to overcome that challenge, and know that if you don't overcome it, you're going to learn from it. And you know what? If you do overcome it, damn, it's good on the other side, but give me that next challenge. I expect and I think that all of those people who help you get to where you are today saw that so much more clearly in you as a person rather than you just being a basketball player. And I think that is why you continue to excel at every level that you were at. That's my hypothesis. I'm just putting it out there.
Coach Kelsey and Coach Mark Prosser, my coaches at Winthrop, has a phrase from Coach Prosser's dad, Skip Prosser, never delay gratitude. And gratitude is a practice. I think I could be a lot better at it, especially going through that process. But just saying it here again now, like, honestly, thank you to each person who invested time in me. I've had different opinions and struggles with my faith throughout the years, but I do believe in God, and I think that's the thread that connects us to great people who it brings us closer to others, to ourselves, and to great experiences. So having faith, having an extraordinary amount of faith, can unlock doors that were otherwise not possible.
Again, Jimmy, your story is incredible. Obviously, I knew a fair amount of it. I was so excited. I just kept telling Parker, just wait. Just wait till you hear Jimmy's story. It's truly so inspiring. And I just can't thank you enough for opening up about some of the struggles. And I know we're just trying to be conscious of your time, that the story does not end there, and there's a whole nother chapter and many more chapters to come, obviously, going from college, trying out for the NBA, making professional teams overseas, having an entire life. I mean, again, we're going to have to run this back, Jimmy, maybe, because I feel like there's a whole nother, like, part two of your story that we didn't even have time to get into, of living overseas, the lessons that you learn internationally about opening your mindset to new perspectives and ideas. Now this next chapter of you taking on a new challenge of Jimmy the professional, Jimmy in the professional world, writing, speaking around the country. And so if you're up for it, I would love to have you back on for a part two. I think we need to have you back on for a part two because you're only just beginning. And so I want to thank you. I want to ask you a couple more questions as we wrap up the episode, just to be conscious of your studio time. But we ask every single person that joins Elevation Nation what their mental motto is. And you mentioned a question that you ask yourself. I don't want to assume that that's your mental motto. So we're going to ask you officially, Jimmy Gavin, what is your mental motto?
No, I think you're right. I think a lot of the experiences continue to manifest, and so did some of the problems. And so when I went overseas, that was a whole nother journey of starting over and having to kind of build back the respect and the pride in your game. And a lot of times, a lot of embarrassing, difficult experiences as well. European basketball being a different sport entirely. But it was rewarding. And I think what I learned in the second half of the journey was a second question. Does what got you in the door keep you in the building? Because I think, for example, like I'm a metaphor person as well, because I think it helps give your voice like a visual. And I think the part of the story that we covered today is like the takeoff or the ascent in a way. But you can't fly a plane at that angle forever, or just, you go too high. You have to find like I was reading again the story of Icarus today, and if you fly too close to the sun, your wings melt, right? And it's an old myth. And if you go too low to the sea, like you drown or you get swallowed up. And the mentor in his story said, "Take the middle flight, Icarus." And I think that was hard for me to find, because I had developed like this character that I felt like I needed to play to get back into college basketball. And I think the second half of my career was about then stripping it away, because it also came with some tough moments. Like one of my coaches was like, I can't help this guy anymore. He refuses to listen. And just dealing with some of the downsides of ambition, which can also make you lose your confidence. But it's a fickle balance, right? If you don't have a healthy amount of ego, you can't perform. So I think just learning how to operate around the world and trying to earn respect and trying to be honest about my limits and kind of coming to terms with that as a player. People didn't even really care about my career anymore. It was like they cared more like when I was in America, but the stuff that happened later in my career, and I guess I was privileged to have a support system in the process that I was exposed to while I was in America. And when I was over there, it's almost like I had to rebuild it for myself. And that second process is what really landed for me. So as a long-winded answer, my mental model for today is train for life. Because I think you prepare to play the game, and then you play the game, and the game teaches you about how you should train. And then you play a basketball career, and that gives you the lessons for, what you're going to do next. So I think it's a commitment to train, prepare, to show up, but also to do it like forever. So I guess that's what I'll go with for today.
I love that. And I also love that you said for today, because I know we were kind of kidding, but Jimmy, we got to have you on for a part 2. I know you are busy. I will compensate you greatly with books and love and connections for your time, but there's so much that we can learn from you. I think you missed one thing, though, that defines you that we didn't hit on, which is you're a good person. I think sometimes we overlook that. There are a lot of not great people that don't care about others in this world. I want to commend you. I know we're new friends, but every single time I've talked to you, Jimmy, you've genuinely cared about the success of me, of Elevation Nation, about what's going on in my life and how you can help me. And I think that's part of the reason that you've gotten so far and you will continue to get places, because you genuinely care about others. You are a good human and a good soul. And on behalf of Parker and myself, I'm just so grateful that we get to officially welcome you to Elevation Nation. We are going to market this as part 1 of Jimmy Gavin's story, because there is a part 2 of the professional career internationally and now beyond that we're going to have to talk about. And so thank you, Jimmy, from the bottom of my heart for joining us and getting vulnerable, and thank you for making an impact on our lives.
Yeah, I appreciate both of you guys. If people want to connect with me, pretty excited. I'll be starting a new role, kind of a full circle moment next Monday, actually. We're founding the first ever NIL collective for Parkside athletics, which is pretty cool because on the other side of those walls was an opportunity to see the entire world. And it all started for me there. It actually started with my friend Omer Ahmed and his brothers. They had a successful business in the area and had gotten involved with Parkside independently of me. But we've known each other for about 10 years. But this year they really looked out for me, because transitioning from not playing into new stuff can be tough, and that's something we could discuss in the future. I mean, it's not like I'm an expert. I'm still going through that right now. But like I said, I'm excited that we'll be developing as a way to support the basketball teams up there and the student athletes. NIL has been a big part of college athletics for Division I. So I think it's pretty cool to bring it to a school that gave me an opportunity. I look forward to continuing the relationship with you guys. Like, I can connect with what you guys are doing because, like I said, if I would have asked for help earlier on, I could have avoided some of that pain. And I see the work that you do with kids and stuff like that. And like I said, I had the benefit of having a family who supported me, and we don't all have that. So I feel like, sharing that structure, what you guys are doing is really important. And yeah, I appreciate today.
You're the man, Jimmy. We appreciate you, and I can't wait for part 2. I'll tell you that. Maybe we can do it in person next time we're in Chicago.
Yeah, just give me a call.
All right, Elevation Nation. Until next week. Peace.